Let's talk about books. Let's talk about what I read in August. The timestamps for each genre are below in case you want them. Here are the stats if you're a stats person. I attempted to read 12 books this month. I read 7 of the 12. 2 of them were pretty short. I DNF'd 5 books because I made the mistake of trying to read the Booker long list. So 4 of the books that I DNF'd were Booker books, which begs the question, do the Booker judges actually read books? The world may never know. I got 10 books from the library and I bought 2. Fortunately, the ones I bought, I finished. Of the 7 books I read 1 nonfiction and 5 fiction. And then breaking down the fiction, I read 3 lit fic, 1 classic, and 1 middle grade, which is a weird combination, but August was a weird reading month. So the formats were 3 paper books, 1 ebook, and 3 audiobooks. First, the books I DNF'd. I DNF'd Headshot and Orbital. If you want to know what I thought of these Booker longlist books, they are in the cards and also down below. I DNF'd Held, another Booker book. I think the novel spans over a century, but the part I read is about John, who was wounded in the First World War and then returns home to his wife Helena to try to rebuild his life. It's got some very pretty writing and some very terrible dialogue, and I felt like Anne Michaels could not decide what the hell she wanted to write about, so there are a lot of false starts on this book. I felt like any one plot that she started would have actually made a pretty good book. Like there's this one section where John opens a photography studio and then ghosts start showing up in the photos, and it's after World War I, so there are a lot of people who are recently dead, and I felt like that would have made a great book, but instead she meanders off in all directions and none of them lead anywhere. Then I started to read My Friends, which is about 3 young men who protest outside the Libyan embassy and get shot, which is a real event. And then Khaled, the main character, gets exiled from Libya. This book was okay, but I certainly didn't feel compelled to finish it, nor do I feel compelled to finish reading the Booker long list. As I've said before, I really enjoy the videos of people who participate, and I was hoping I could make friends with the cool kids who read and review the long list, but I just don't get this prize at all. So I shall remain on the outside looking in. Finally, I DNF'd Skippy Dies by Paul Murray. This is a good book. I just want to say a lot of times there are good books, and even though they're good books, I still don't finish them. I don't have ADD as far as I know, but I just feel like life is too short to finish a book I'm not enjoying. So Skippy Dies is well written. The dialogue is good. The characters are well developed. It has the characteristic Paul Murray humor and absurdity. However, I hated most of the characters in this book, and by the time I was 200 pages in, I didn't care at all why Skippy died, so I gave up. I think I'm going to stop documenting the books I don't finish, both here and on Goodreads. I started doing it on Goodreads when I first started Goodreads because I wanted to keep a record so that I didn't restart books that I had already started that I didn't like, but I don't know. It seems kind of pointless, so I think I'm going to spare everybody that, except for ones I recommend, like Skippy Dies. Anyhow, on to the books I finished. First up, nonfiction. I only read 1 nonfiction this month, and that was Martin Amis's The Rub of Time. This is a book of essays which covers a lot. Everything from porn to Princess Diana, Nabokov to Trump to Hitchens. Martin Amis is a really good writer, though he is quite salty and cantankerous. I like a writer who, even when I completely disagree with him, I still like reading what he's written and mulling over his opinions. He writes a lot about writing and writers, and one part of the book that stuck with me because I have not been enjoying what I'm reading lately. As I said, I'm having a bit of an existential crisis about my books. He says that even his favorite authors have written stuff he doesn't like, leading me to think that my reading expectations may be too high. So there's this one quote. He says, "Novelists can be likened to omnicompetent tour guides as they gloss and vivify the wonders of unfamiliar terrains, the marketplaces, the museums, the tea rooms and wine cellars, the gardens and houses of worship. Then, without warning, the suave cicerone becomes a garrulous rogue cab driver, bearing you off on a series of sinister detours, out by the airport and in the dead of night. The great writers can take us anywhere, but half the time they're taking us where we don't want to go." So this book of essays is worth reading, and my lord, it was a relief to read something decent and coherent after the long list. Next up is fiction. So there are a few classic novels that I just don't get on with. I either hated them, or I couldn't get into them, or some of them just gave me the same feeling I get when I wake up from a bad nap, just groggy and tired, and I wish I had done something else with my time. A few that I can think of off the top of my head are Watership Down, Little Women, Beloved, The Old Man and the Sea. At the same time, these books are so widely loved that I feel like I need to give a few of them a second chance. So I've got Watership Down on hold at the library, so that's my next one. But this month I read Beloved. And I read this originally when I was much younger, and I didn't really remember much about it. I just recall really hating this book because there's a child who abuses her mother by pinching her, and then the mom just puts up with it, and it really pissed me off. And if you are thinking, what the hell are you talking about, Cheryl? There's nothing like that in Beloved. You are correct, and I am a dumbass because I basically hated this book for years over something that doesn't even happen in it. Although I think as somebody who's older, I wouldn't give a book 1 star just because I hated a character, and I would be able to see that silence while being abused is obviously making a larger point about something. But anyway, this is a great book. It's great writing, great plot, very innovative. It's outstanding. I gave it 4 stars. Mea culpa to Toni Morrison fans. I am an idiot. Then I read two Claire Keegan books, Foster and Small Things Like These. These are really short. Chekhov is one of my favorite writers, and I see a lot of Chekhov in Claire Keegan. Unfortunately, it seems that, like Chekhov, she doesn't publish much, but the economy and the beauty of her writing, she writes very obliquely. She doesn't spotlight the big stuff. She focuses on the periphery. Her stories don't have an agenda or talking points. She makes you bring yourself to the page and do a lot of the work. These are both really short, so I don't want to spoil them by giving a synopsis, but I'm also an Irish history buff, so I was bound to like these, I guess. Small Things Like These is about the Magdalen laundries, sort of. I mean, inadvertently. And the Magdalen laundries were essentially labor camps for prostitutes and unwed mothers, but they were much worse than prisons because there was no set sentence. You were just there. And they were run by the church and the government, which at the time was pretty much the same thing. And women and children who tried to escape would just be brought back. And most of them were essentially kidnapped. And then they would take the babies forcibly from the mothers and adopt them out. So over 3,500 babies were adopted. Many hundreds of babies died and just disappeared. Hundreds of women died and disappeared. But what was going on in the conditions they lived in really wasn't common knowledge. So in Small Things Like These, it's not an expose, right? She doesn't tackle this horrific injustice head on. She just takes a sliver. She takes the long way around. So it can feel like an incomplete exploration, and it is. And I saw complaints that, why didn't she just write a novel blowing the whole thing wide open? That's just not the novel she was writing. And obviously, she writes very short books, and that couldn't be done in 100 pages. So anyway, I'm sure she's not for everyone. She may not be for you, but I love her. I also read Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. And if you're interested in what I thought, I did a short 5-minute review. It was good, but ultimately I felt like it needed to be weirder. I read Enlightenment by Sarah Perry, which was also on the Booker long list, which I like better than the other Booker books, but that's not saying much. You can watch my review here. It was okay. The dialogue and the characters were pretty bad. The plot was mid. I don't understand this prize, as I have said before. The last book I read is The Phantom Tollbooth, and it's a middle grade book by Norton Juster. You would think, for as finicky as I am about books, you would think that my favorite books would be great works of literature, but they're really not. In fact, a lot of my favorite books really aren't that good in the sense of being well crafted or well written. They're my favorites because of what they evoke in me, like the experience they give me. They give me an understanding about something that I lack, something that I need to learn or change, or maybe they uncover a truth that I haven't seen before, and I never know where I'm going to find something like that, which is why I really try to read widely. So anyway, I read and loved The Phantom Tollbooth when I was a kid, and I wanted to see if it held up. It's a story about Milo, who is bored with his life, even though he's only 10. And he comes home from school one day and there's a mysterious package that turns out to be a toll booth. And when he puts it together, he drives his toy car through it and he finds himself in another land. There's a lot of wordplay and silliness in this. It's got some Alice in Wonderland vibes, and for me, it definitely held up. So next week I will be doing a TBR where I try to figure out why I haven't really been enjoying the books I've been reading and what I can do about that. So I hope that you will join me next Monday. That's it for me. I'm really glad you're here. Take care.